Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Mobile Meeple People podcast. I'm still Adam and I'm with
Gary, and Adam seems to be unable to remember that it's the MMPP.
I was so concentrated, and I already swore. I was concentrated on remembering to say our names because I always forget our names. Anyways, yes, MMPP, Mobile Meeple People podcast. But welcome to another episode. This is going to be our Captain Con coverage special, whatever you want to say. Pretty much, we're just going to talk about all the stuff that we did at Captain Con, cover all the stuff that was there because honestly, I was impressed with it. I was shocked to see how big it was, the options they had, and the little stuff they had on top of something that you don't see at PAX, which I thought was cool too, that obviously brought people in.
It's a very small con, but I like that it was it felt more friendly. I don't want to say that PAX is unfriendly, but just there was more of like a hometown, like a small business feel to it. I think they made 1,100 this year for attendance, what they said was a record, and it felt like more people than that. You know, there was people around everywhere doing something. There was so much going on. The staff were all very friendly, even the volunteers. They were very easy to talk to and figure out. I asked a lot of questions because I wanted to know what was going on, how we did the captain's log, or how we did all these certain things there.
Yeah, it was cool. Like you said, it felt very small town because you'd see someone that you like, hey, I remember playing a game with you, or you'd see the same people walking around. And it seemed like it was definitely busy enough to, like, I guess, justify everything that was going on, which is obviously good because they have to justify doing this every year. But it never felt crazy busy where you're like, I guess I'm going to just stand here for 15, 20 minutes, like the raffle. One thing we can talk about later, obviously. But there was a ton of prizes that were given away, but that didn't seem that long. We were sitting and still involved, and the guy who presented it, which I wish I remembered the names, but unfortunately I'm terrible with names, so I apologize for that. But he was great with entertaining people in between and, joking about how long it was taking because it was tough. Some people had to pick up through like 50. I mean, actually, I think they even had more than that. I think there was like almost 100 items of stuff that they could give away. But anyways, I'm getting off track. So we'll just cover it. I think we'll do the same thing like we normally do with our PAX Unplugged coverage and just break it down day by day of what we pretty much did and saw. So started off on Friday. I went. Gary had to work because he used all of his time. He used up all his time off because he's going to Japan and Ireland and Germany and I don't know, Mars and stuff like that. So he's always got plans to go somewhere. So he worked on Friday, but I went down there on Friday just to check it out and scope things out. And I met with a lot of vendors, spoke to them. There was a lot of people that handcrafted a bunch of stuff. There was a lot of cool things. One thing on our Instagram that I posted, it was, I want to say Tallydactyl. I might be saying it incorrectly and I apologize, but she had this like art that really reminded me of Toil and Troubles, the Grandpa Beck's game that we just did a review. And it definitely was my type of vibe. It was magical and it was animals and toadstools and things like
Whimsical
that.
Whimsical is the word that you're searching for.
Whimsical? What did I say? What did I say? Did I say anything? I just didn't say anything.
You didn't. You were just describing all this stuff, but whimsical is a very good description of Tallydactyl shop.
It was cool because I was like, hey, your art reminds me of this. I actually took a picture if you're on our Instagram and showed how it's definitely fit that vibe. She actually had like a gallery too that I posted about with that posting as well. And then I talked to a couple other people that did leather work. There was some that actually had this, I don't want to call it chainmail. It was like scales. Again, I'm not familiar with the terms of all those, but they had that there. There was precious stone dice. There was a bunch of stuff. So got to look around, see a bunch of those things, demoed a few games. Something I posted already, my interview with Over the Tabletop. Yes, Over the Tabletop games. And they did Broken Pass, which I looked up and I saw even before the convention. And then I got to demo that. Gary didn't get a chance to try it, but we will be getting a copy when that gets released, and we'll obviously do a review of it and let you guys know about that game. But I got to sit down and interview him and obviously play that game, which was an interesting game. It's got that like everyone can do feel, but also has that strategy, which is nice. Demoed a couple other games, and then I couldn't figure out what to do, and I saw a tournament for Finger Guns at High Noon, and I've heard about the game but never got to play it. And I was like, hey, here's a chance to play it. And then I looked at like the sign up sheet, and there was only 3 people, and I was like, oh, sweet. And I looked up the video, and I figured out a strategy. I can win this, and it was tickets, and you win the game and stuff like that for the tournament. So, and I sat down at the table. I was like, hey, have you played this before? And all of them were like, no, I never played it. I was like, sweet, I got this. And then I see a guy walk in full cowboy gear, and I was like, okay. And of course he walks over and he's like, is this where the tournament is? And I was like, oh, okay, fine, whatever. And the guy's like, yeah. And he's like, oh yeah, it's over here, guys. And then I wasn't paying attention because I was just looking at him, and I turned and there's like 5 or 6 other people all in cowboy get up and everything. And I was like, are you serious? And they all signed up, and then I wound up talking to him. He's like, yeah, I won it last year. And I was like, of course you did. You all know each other. You're all ready to go. They had their own bar cart. They were a crew from Philly, and they come down and do it, I guess, every year, Captain Con. So I was talking to them. I lost. I won one game, but lost every other game. Still fun game. Still something I want to pick up actually later. It was just a party game where someone yells 3, 2, 1, shoot, and you have all these symbols that you put with your hands, whether it's like a normal gun that you're making with your hand, or you can do dynamite, you can do a thumbs up, a bunch of different things. So definitely a fun game. Definitely have to pick it up and suggest you try it because it's just so simple and just fun. Lost, and I was like, okay, fine, it's getting late. I didn't get a hotel room because I was like, I'm just gonna pop in a few hours and drive back. And then they're like, hey, there's a Munchkin tournament. And I was like, I know how to play Munchkin, but I was like, really, it could go long. And then they were like, yeah, it's a Gen Con ticket. And I was like, okay, so I'm gonna play because again, there wasn't too many people. And of course, I go over, and then they're like, oh, it's a table over there too, and you can sit over there. And I walk over, and there's these 2 guys with Munchkin playmats, and they were old playmats that definitely got use. And I was like, great. I was like, I'm just not gonna win with these. But wound up playing, did pretty well, but couldn't win it. It was funny too because I was talking with them, and the guy who won it, it was a father and son actually team. And the son was like, yeah, I was actually just here to demo my game. I didn't think I was going to win tickets to Gen Con. And I was like, oh, what's your game? And he was like, oh, the Fate Experiment. I was like, I was looking for you all day. I couldn't find you. He was like, oh, I was in this room. And apparently I missed a bunch of rooms my first day there. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like,
Adam doesn't know how to read maps.
I really don't. Well, you pointed it out when we went Saturday. You're like, oh, it's in this room. And I was like, where the hell are those rooms? And you're like, look, here's the map. And I was like, oh, I probably could have looked at that map. But yeah, so
somebody's too used to the breadcrumb trails in video games.
I get lost easily. I mean, who uses a map nowadays? Yeah, well, Gary raised his hand for the people that aren't watching. So wound up meeting the guy who did the Fate Experiment. Dagan, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. I apologize if I'm not. But we can jump ahead, I guess, a little bit, but it was interesting because I was talking to him, and I was like, oh, I want to play your game. I have a podcast, and this was before Gary got here. Maybe we can sit down. I know you're not demoing it anymore, but we can sit down and play a game. And our schedules just didn't match up the whole convention, but it was cool. At one point, he was like, hey, I checked out your podcast. He actually said he liked it, which was shocking. And he was like,
I mean, I don't know why you think it's shocking. People like me, I'm in the podcast. You haven't let me talk much today. Generally, I say enough funny things that people find entertaining.
Well, you'll talk more about that, or you weren't here. So, but either way, Dagan was really nice. He was like, hey, here's a copy of the game so you guys can actually try it out because I know we're not going to be able to match up schedules. And I was like, oh, cool. I was like, we can try it out. Maybe we can do a review of it or whatever. And he's like, you don't have to. And I was like, oh, why not? Like, we'll talk about how good it is or whatever after we play it. So we'll be giving a review of that later on. But either way, appreciate that, obviously, from him. But burned out of both tournaments, went home around like midnight, tired. And then Gary obviously was like, when are we going, early? And I was like, no, I got home so late at night. So we wound up in, what time did we go? Like, it was 11, I think.
Got there at like 11. Because I think I picked you up at like 9:30 or 10. And by the time you got fully dressed and you did your makeup and hair and everything, drove out there. It was snowing a little bit, and it's in Warwick, Rhode Island. For people that don't know New England, Rhode Island is difficult to get pretty much anywhere, and Warwick is a great little area, but it's not really even central to like the main highways and stuff. So you have to take these back roads. Sometimes there's a lot of hills, and the snow was luckily not too bad. But by the time we got there, it was like about 11, I think.
Yeah, you're mostly on the highway. Then it just like kicks you off, and it's like drive down this road for the next 40 minutes. And it's a single, well, not single lane, but opposite lane. It's not like you can pass anyone or anything if you're stuck behind someone slow. But either way, not too bad. But still, I mean, I'm complaining. Obviously, where I live is the same way, so it takes like 20 minutes to get to some civilization.
But yeah, talk more about the Captain Con. It's in a hotel, and the hotel has a lot of amenities to it. There was a Starbucks in there. They had a lot of parking. There was a bunch of different entrances you could go in, and they had spread out across all these different rooms. They also had upstairs where we did our miniature painting. So there was a lot of, you could walk around, and it wasn't like sometimes you go to a convention that's like one room and then the other room and that's it. There was enough space for everything, I felt like, and it didn't really, only once or twice when we were looking to like sit down and like play a game or something did we have to look for a few minutes, but it wasn't like PAX where you had to be there early in the morning or you were just out of luck.
Oh, yeah.
I did enjoy that. We walked around and Adam showed me a lot of the stuff he talked about the day before, and then we sat down and tried, what was it, Magician's Way?
Magician's Challenge.
Magician's Challenge, my bad. Very fun game, card game that we'll go over in the future. We talked with the creator, and he told us about how he got the idea during COVID, and he'd been working on the game throughout, and it had morphed from a food-based game, but he'd talked to some publishers, and they're like, not another food-based game. I guess there's been a lot of them. So he switched it to the magician theme, and really nice guy. He ended up giving us a copy that we'll be reviewing later on.
Yeah. That's by Tabletop Shelf Games. That game is actually out, so if you go on Amazon and look up Magician's Challenge, you can actually purchase that now. I just looked it up. It was like $25 or something. But yeah, so you can check it out, but we will be doing a actual review of that. And yeah, I thought it was interesting theme-wise that it's magic, but it's not like your fantasy magic that you see all the time. So it's something different that you don't see as actual theme in many games. So
True.
And then what else did we do?
We walked around and talked to some of the vendors, and we did the painting class that was taught by a lady. Do you remember her name? I was looking it up because my roommate paints a lot, and I told him her name, her stream, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of her. I've seen some of her streams before."
Yeah, she's on Instagram as, I believe, Muse's Touch. Her name starts with a C, and I apologize because she was great.
Carl Pandolf?
No, it was started with a C.
That's Twitch streamer Muse's Touch.
Then maybe that's not the name of the Instagram. Either way, she was great. So it was cool too because obviously I've never painted before, so she just stepped with like eyes, and we spent a ton of time on eyes, which you got to think on a miniature is almost nothing. But she was talking about how you can sort of blotch out, you can put a ton of white on and you're just going to cover it up, and talked about the details and, even like the shading around the eyebrow or around the eye sockets and everything. Definitely did not try to do that. I did at first and it just failed. So then I just,
is her.
Is it her? What's the name?
Harold Pandolf.
That is not her name. Harold?
Carol.
Oh, Carol. I thought you said Harold.
Carol. Jesus. What do you have, Skittles in your ears?
You got to speak up, youngin.
Yeah, whatever. 2 weeks older than me. But yeah, she was really great. Spent a lot of time talking about, it was a beginner's class and nobody had really painted before. Adam did, and I won't say this often, but Adam did very well. He did much better than me, and the photographic proof is also out there. But that's partially due to his ADHD. Like he sat there and was spending so much time on it. Meanwhile, I was like, all right, what are we doing next?
You also were painting these because we brought our own miniatures our own miniatures from Clank, the legacy game that we played, because we wanted to sort of commemorate that. And they also give you miniatures when you do the class as well. But Gary was painting both because he's just like, no, 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 and then jumping to the other one. So he was following her lead on the actual miniature, and then he was just doing his own thing on the Clank one. So,
well, because she was taking a long time explaining like the eyes and everything, and I'm like, man, I'm never gonna paint this miniature, and I'm never gonna do it again. To be honest,
right.
I enjoyed it. It was nice to do, but I'm not gonna go out buy all the paints. And we talked about this. It's just not for me. It's a hobby that I don't have the time and effort for. So I wanted to like finish it. And I just, my years of food service, like I'm pretty good with time management. And I'm looking at the clock going like, I have to like bounce back and forth and like, not follow her lead. Cause I mean, most of the people didn't actually finish their miniature.
Yeah. And again, she wanted to make sure that she was giving all the like little detail things that people don't think about, like put some pupils on the eyes. Don't go with all the same color. Mix in either a darker color or a lighter color for shading and stuff like that. And obviously, it was a beginner one, so you want to make sure you're giving them as much information as possible. And it was cool because she was like, "Any questions? Like, you can literally ask me anything." And one person there actually knew of her and knew definitely wasn't their first time painting, so they like, "Hey, how do you do this? And where did you win this award and everything?" So it was really cool. And I follow her on Instagram now, and just the detail she has on stuff where she's painting a little knife on their leg. I would probably kill someone because I don't know how I would be able to paint with that much detail. But it came out cool, and now we have to actually play a game with both those miniatures. But that was fun, and yeah, I would like to be good at painting, but I just don't have patience.
No, definitely not. And it was $20, but you got the miniature and you got access to all the paints and a very talented painter there to show you and overlook. So it was very worth. I think it was a 2-hour class, so definitely one of the few things that we actually paid for over the weekend. That was one thing to mention too, is that there was a lot of stuff to do. You really didn't have to buy tickets to go to this or do that. And the food there was pretty reasonable. They had like the hotel, they had a little concession stand. They'd have like eggs and bagels and stuff in the morning. And then in the afternoon, they had cheese fries and hot dogs and all that stuff. And they did have beer as well. But I was on my self-imposed 2 weeks of letting my liver heal because it's going to get wrecked this next 4 or 5 months.
They had a lot of stuff actually at the food thing. Like there was salad, there was juice, there was a whole spread. And again, no line whatsoever. The prices were reasonable, and you could get like a whole meal under $15. What is it? Maybe 10 feet away from where the tables were, where you could sit down and set up your game. So
for sure, it was definitely, it's not like sometimes you're at a bigger convention. Oh, I got to go out to eat, and it's going to be a 2-hour turnaround from the time that you get out, go to the place, get your food, come back. It was much simpler to manage that there. There was also a grocery store nearby, and there was a lot of accessibility to that. I enjoyed. Badges were easy to pick up, and the book, I guess, is something we should talk about as well. The captain's log, they gave you your normal book that you get for the convention. It had all these different things in there that you could get signed. If you bought $8 worth of food at the concession stand, you'd get a stamp. And if you shopped at different vendors, or if you played a game, a demoed a game, different things, you could get signed off, and those would give you points that you could turn in throughout the weekend to get other different things, dice or a bag of candy or miniatures and board games. And I kept having to remind Adam, like, hey, we got to get our stamp, we got to get our stamp. But it's just kind of the nature. I'm more detail oriented to something like that. And they refreshed like the prizes every day. There's a lot of things were either charity based or giving. There was a lot you got throughout the weekend.
Yeah. So the captain's log was cool, and everything you did, you would get a stamp for. Like, oh, I just played a casual game with a person. Yep, you get a stamp. I did a tournament. You get a stamp. The class that we did, you get a stamp. I demoed this game, stamp. So it was really cool. I bought something at a vendor. I bought food. You got a stamp if you bought food, which I'm like, all right, cool. So we wound up actually getting, I think I wound up getting like 50 something points.
Yeah, you got like 50 and I had like 40 something, which ended up getting, we got a couple little cool things, and it was nice to do. There was also the raffle, which happened Saturday night. They were offering tickets, and all the proceeds went to this women's shelter in Boston. And it's Rosie's Place. Very long-standing. They've had a lot of opportunity to help people out there, and I guess they've had this partnership for years. and it was like $15 for 20 tickets, or $50 got you a wingspan, like arm to
Yeah.
arms worth of them.
Yep.
And you pick somebody with a bigger one if you wanted. And there was probably about 50 or so donations, and some of them were very, expensive donations. There was this one leather worker who had donated one of her pieces that was like a $400 piece. It was an acorn shaped purse. It was one of the first things that went. And there was like a board game, like a dice rolling tower screen that somebody had made, and all kinds of different stuff. Adam
There's
actually
a box of miniatures too.
Yeah.
That was there too. Yeah, there was a ton of stuff, and like I said, there was about 100 something items that were there, which was crazy.
Adam won a pretty early on, and he ended up picking up a board game, of course. He's yelling at me. He's like, "What should I get?" I was like, I had already looked at all the games and like looked them up on Board Game Geek. So I was like, get that one. It's by the same company that does Everdell. It's called Flourish, I believe.
Yeah, so that's cool too. We wound up winning that game, and we'll probably play and talk about that obviously at some point. There were so many items, and there was a lot of people filling this huge room of everyone that donated. I forgot how much they said they wound up getting. Like it was over $5,000 or whatever like that.
I would say it was closer to 6, but either way, they raised a lot of money.
Yeah, and it was great too because obviously there was points like when I went up and I'm like, I don't know what to pick. Which one should I get? And there's so many options, and the guy had to like slow it down a bit and just rib and you sort of just go off cuff and just try to figure out what to do and say to entertain people. And he was great. Like it was so entertaining. He made the joke like every time he called a number, he would say it once. He'd say it twice. And then the third time someone's like, "Oh yeah, I have it." And he's like, "Do I have to say it 3 times?" And like literally I think there was once where someone after the second time was like, "Oh yeah, I actually have it." So it was fun. It was entertaining. Even just sitting there waiting for your number, even if you didn't get called, it was still a good time. And, people came up. There was one vendor actually that kept winning. He bought a ton, but he didn't take any of the actual prizes, probably because I don't know if he put in some of the prizes. So he'd go up and they're like, "What is he going to take?" And he'd take like a sweet and low packet. And everyone's like, "Oh, there's like a dozen eggs," was one of the things.
Yeah, that was the last thing to go, was the dozen eggs. But just looking up real quick, they raised $5,700 for Rosen's.
Nice.
The MC, he's one of the 5 main people that run the convention. They're a group called Privateer Press, I believe it is. Privateer. Something or other.
They were great.
I apologize. I wanted to get their name right. It's New England Privateers LLC is the group that runs Captain Con. And we saw them all throughout the weekend. They're all very friendly.
Yeah, so it was a blast. What else did we do? We demoed a bunch of games. So there was cool is there was games that was there that you could actually purchase, and then there were games that like weren't even out yet and they were in their testing phase. So that was fun too. One game that we sat down and played, it was by Otama Garden, AUTOMA Garden, was Starline Hill. It was a 2-player game.
It was a hexagonal based game where you were putting these hexes into a grid or an area play area. We had played the expedited version, so I think it was like a 5 slightly smaller area. And when you put down, you could put one of your stars on top of it, and you were trying to align them into certain constellations. And the more difficult ones to get would give you more points. And there was another action that you could take that if you had 2 points in between, and there was no other stars there, you could fill all of them. So you could kind of like make bigger plays, and so you'd have to keep an eye on your opponents doing the same. But whenever you filled a card, you took all of your stars off, and you weren't allowed to put them onto an already placed area unless you did, like I said earlier. But I really enjoyed that game. We'll have to keep an eye out for that one because I think they were just kickstarting it.
Yeah. Like the one we played was it felt like all 3D printed product, and there was only 2 boards out there. So I don't even think they had a Kickstarter, or maybe they were just doing the Kickstarter. They were fairly new, but yeah, it was interesting. You were trying to think ahead, and it was something different from a 2-player game. Usually it's like you go, I go, you go, I go, and then there was time
if you didn't have something to go. So there was and the game ended when either both people passed or there were no more viable moves.
I won that game with help from one of the guys, actually, because he's like, "You could just put this here and take that card," and I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, I guess I'm going to do that," and that literally like won me the game. Otherwise, I would have lost. But yeah, I liked it. The other game that we demoed was another game that isn't out yet. So Mill Rat Pack. So it was Mill Rat Pack is the name of the game. It's by Mill Rat Studios, and it's a 5-in-1 game. We tried 2 of the 5 games. I don't remember the name of either one, but one was you got a pitcher, and in the pitcher, there's a bunch of little mini pitchers inside this big pitcher you have inside a frame. And you're looking at all these random pitchers and random shapes. What is it?
It's called Scrapbook. I looked them up. They're on. They're launching soon on Kickstarter.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so yeah, we played Scrapbook. There's just 4 little corners of a frame that's on the middle of the table. That's the only thing on the actual table itself. Then you have these big cards that have little pictures inside the frame on the picture. One person can't look at it. They show everyone else, and then they tell you to open up your photos on your phone. And which was funny because everyone's like, well, what if you come across a not PG photo? And they're like, pick a different one. So we're scrolling through, and then at some point they're like, stop, and you just randomly, whatever your finger's on, that's the picture you do. You click on it, and then you have to make that photo on your phone match one of the pictures that would fit in the frame, and then you have to put it where it would be on the frame. And then the person has to flip through all the different pictures and figure out which one it is compared to all the photos. It was cool too, because you're like, okay, well, this is like a circle and this is a circle here, so you can match it. It was something I thought was cool for the cross of like technology and board games, but not, it's an app, because I feel like that's a common thing that happens.
It did good too, getting people invested in the games. Normally, like when not people's turns, they're on their phone, they're just scrolling, so it took that aspect out of it. And you could also like zoom in or crop the picture. So if it was a picture of a person, you could be like, oh, well, this part of his eye kind of looks like this little circle or something in the picture. So it was cooperative and everybody could help everyone else out. I did enjoy that game. And you like each time that you succeeded, you would get another card mixed in. So it'd be harder and harder for the person trying to pick. And we joined in about partway through a group playing, and I think we ended up finishing the game with them. I did enjoy that one.
Yeah, that was like a perfect convention party type game. Like, again, we didn't know anyone. We were sitting down, everyone's like joking or whatever about the pictures. And
it turns out that I did know one of the guys. He was the nephew of a friend of mine, and I'd actually played a game with him at another convention, but it was like 5-10 years ago, and they were probably in their late teens, early 20s. So the last time I'd seen them, they were much younger, so I didn't recognize, but it was entertaining.
Yeah. That was funny. Small world, but yeah, that was a fun game. And then I don't, well, you probably have the other one.
Footfalls.
You can talk about that game.
It was called Footfalls. You were trying to get your raccoons across a bridge to get first dibs on the abandoned picnic. So there were these 3 cards that you would put out, and you had 2 or 3, no, we had 4, because it was 2
We had 4, yeah, I think it was
4 little markers that you were trying to move across this bridge, and it was kind of like the game Frogger. If you're old like us, it was all of these different blocks that you could move across the water, but they didn't obviously just line straight up, so you had to like move across. And there were 5 cards that you had that there were slide, tether, jump, diagonal, and shove, I believe were the ones. So you had to pick 2 of the cards, and you could but didn't have to use those in your actions. You got 5 actions in a turn. So you could move your guy 5 ways up, or if you had like the tether, you could move 2 guys, and they all would work together. There was one that we kind of agreed was a little bit stronger than all the rest of them, and I think it was tether. Like when it lined up, you could really do
if it was well. Tether, yeah, if you could combine, because you could only pick 2, and you were shut off from 1 or 2 cards. I forgot how it worked out. Somehow where
you
it
had to pick one of the top 2, and then one of the bottom 3, I think is what it was.
Something like that, yeah. So you were always shut out of one thing that you could definitely not do, and you always had to do one of the last 2 that someone else did. So if I did like jump and tether, I think you'd have to do the top one, which maybe if it was jump, whatever it was, it was weird to try to plan ahead and try to figure out what you wanted to do. And sometimes you would just, I felt like I would get lucky and be like, oh, I have tether and slide, and my people are perfectly lined up where I can just move all my people pretty quickly and things like that. So
each time you got to the end of a card, you flip the next one, and whoever flipped it got the ability to whichever oriented the way they wanted. So you could be like, oh, this is perfect for my guy. And if you managed to push somebody off, they would go back a row. So it wasn't like the end of the world. You didn't reset to the beginning. overall fun game. I think 2-player, it needed a slight tweak or something
Yeah.
be, because it did seem like you got ahead, and I really couldn't. I did catch up some, but I knew that I wasn't going to be able to win because you had like all 4 of your guys on the third card by the time I reached with the second with some of my guys, so it was hard to catch up.
Yeah, I think it was one of those games that is playable at 2, but I think shines probably with 3 or 4, especially because I think there's going to be more shoving and your movements are going to be completely different. By the time you go and 2 or 3 other people go, you have no idea what the moves are going to be for your options. So you can't sort of plan ahead. You have to go with what you have, which I think would limit what you can do. So I still liked it. I wish we played the other games too. We'll obviously try those out as well at some point.
Yeah, I followed them on Kickstarter, so I'll get alerted when they're going to be launching.
Backing a Kickstarter counts as buying a game. Just
backing is, yes, but I followed. I didn't back it. I followed it.
Okay, fair enough. I played Broken Pass, so I won't even really talk too much about that. There's a huge interview on YouTube. Actually, we're on YouTube now, so there's a YouTube video of that interview, and I also put it on our podcast channel, I guess it's called, as well. So you can check that out. We also did, by SRG Universe, they had 2 games. We did Scallywag, which is just like Liar's Dice. If you ever played that, it's mostly everyone rolls 6 dice, I think, and starts with the starting player, and they're like, oh, I bet there's a certain amount of dice with this number. So you can be like, oh, there's 4 3s. And then the next person can try to up that bet and be like, oh, there's 5 3s, or there's 4 6s, or I don't know, however. Pretty much, I think the total number
had to be bigger. So you would there was the amount and then the number. So you could say there's 4 4s, and then you would have to say 4 5s or 6s, or 5 of anything else, and you would just keep going up like that. So you couldn't say if I said 4 6s, you couldn't say there's 4 4s. That's lower. You could say there's 5 4s.
Yeah, one or the other had to be higher. So pretty much it goes around till at some point someone can either say parlay, which mostly you're saying there's exactly what that number is saying. So there's exactly 4 6s or whatever, or you call them a scallywag because you're like, no, you're lying. And then everyone reveals the dice. And if there isn't what the person said, then they wind up, at least what the person said. So if they said at least 4 6s, if there's 5 6s, they still would win. If they were lying and there's only 2 6s, then the person who called them out wins. So they get to keep all their dice. Whoever lost loses a die. And the difference between this and Liar's Dice, is there's cards. So they get either treasure or adventure card.
Treasure and adventure, which both seem pretty strong.
Yeah, they give you like huge powers, like, oh, change the number that you were saying after dice are revealed, or if you lose, who cares? Or if you have the black spot, they lose 7, or not 7 dice, that's a little extreme, but it was something really strong. And some you showed everyone so you could see what they had, and some were ones that you could use and secretly be like, aha, never mind, we're not doing that. So it was just an interesting twist on Liar's Dice, because I've played that before, and it's pretty basic, but I thought the cards were interesting to give it a little twist. And of course, it was perfect to obviously demo at Captain Con because it was a pirate game. So it was interesting.
Very on brand. There was a lot of good branding there too. They did have a lot of, people dressing up and getting into the theme. And the other game we played was Super Show.
Yeah. We won't get too much into that because we do have a review copy of that game. So we'll obviously talk more about it when we review it. But it's mostly a wrestling game, card game that's, I guess, an LCG, right? I still don't know exactly what the different
limited card game. So they do release different things, but there's a structure you have to have cards numbered 1 to 30. And so you could take out your 27 card and put in a different 27 card. And all 27 cards are going to be a specific type of card. So it is, you can't just buy the strongest, best cards and go out and beat your opponent. But there was a lot of fun mechanics. The community seems fantastic. Everybody was really into it. There was Belt, Discord, and, it was a very lively group, which was very infectious in learning the game. We had 2 or 3 people coming over and, watching us learn, you teaching me.
Yeah. And again, I got taught on Friday, and then wound up showing Gary because it's such a quick and easy game to learn that I was able to show him. I got a couple things wrong that I forgot about, but obviously someone was there to be like, no, remember this, and I was like, oh yeah. Gary beat me so bad that there's a point where you roll a die and sort of kick out if you know wrestling. Again, I don't want to get too much into it, but there's a point where you can kick out and be like, oh, 1, 2, 3. And if it's 3 and you don't roll high enough, then the other person wins. And at one point, Gary pinned me so bad that I couldn't even, there's no way I could roll high enough to kick out. I guess they were like, oh, no, you submitted him. So I tapped out. I got beaten so badly. So I will give Gary that. He did. And again, of course, I was being a jerk the whole time and just being like, I'm going to destroy you in this game. I already know how to play it. And
didn't happen. But there was a lot of similarities and legally distinct characters. But overall, it was an entertaining game. And
that was great.
Playing it again.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about it. We got a 4-player pack. So we played it 1v1, but you can do like 3 for like a free-for-all. You can do a tag team. So we want to try out all those modes before we actually give you guys a full review of what we think about the game.
We'll definitely have to have that at the MMPP con.
Yes. So a little off subject, at the end of this month, we're going to have our own little convention. It's at my house. Who knows if we're going to make it bigger and release it to the public or anything like that. I say the public, it's all friends and families listening to this anyways, but it's mostly just a 3-day weekend. We sort of piggybacked on our friend's idea. He does it every year for his birthday, and just sort of like an open door policy for the 3-day weekend of anyone to just pop in either Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, just play a couple games. They can come, they can leave, things like that. And then we're just going to be eating and hanging out and playing games and stuff like that. Gary mentioned with the play to win that we did at Captain Con, he's like, we should do that here. And I'm like, well, I don't have sponsors.
But we have games that we could, multiples or something, or we could do a raffle of some of the games that we have,
Actually, speaking of play to win, I don't think we really talked about that. Yeah, so they have a play to win thing, which was huge. They had a ton of games. I thought it was actually their board game library, but it was just all play to win games. So you pick a game, play it, you'd sign that you played the game and you want a chance to win it. So like, let's say you played it and you didn't like it, you don't have to put your name down obviously to win it, because you're like, never mind, I got to play it, I don't like it, moving on. But we were able to play quite a few games. One I actually just posted about today. Well, not today, it'll be yesterday, because obviously this won't come until later, or 2 days. Anyways,
people aren't going to be time checking you. It's fine.
Either way, we posted about Trekking the World, which looked interesting.
You did not win that one, sadly, because that game was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was a solid game. We did win Zoomies, which we'll talk about later. I don't want to spend too much time on the actual games themselves. It's more about what Captain Con has to offer. But we did pick up Zoomies. Huh?
Dogamos. Dominoes and dogs.
I mean, yes, that's mostly what it was. It was like King Domino, but I think a little more difficult than King Domino.
I think so, yeah.
What else? You won Sears catalog. It was interesting because it was like werewolves, and it was an interesting twist on a trick-taking game. It was by the same people that did like One Night Werewolf, go figure. And then there was Kingfire Delve. Forget which one we got.
Vainglorious Grotto.
Yeah. So we picked up that, which is it's more of a solo game, but you can play it with 2 players. But something that I actually took from Gary, because I think you won that. But I was like, I play more solo games at work than you do, so I'm going to take it from you. Again, interesting game. Don't want to go too much into it. And then I think the last game that I picked up was 20 Strong, right? 20 Strong?
Yes, 20 Strong.
Yeah, which is another solo game that, again, interesting. We'll talk about probably later. So, but really cool. And again, they had a ton of games to win. Like the system too, they would just text you on Sunday morning, be like, "Yep, you won 2 games. Pick them up." And you just buy and be like, "Yep, I have these 2 games," and it was simple, smooth. It was nice.
Yeah, they had a very large game library as well. I wasn't sure how much of the game library they're going to have. There was a lot of folks just playing their own games there, people looking to teach or looking for groups, and people testing or play testings, and there was the tournament. There was a lot going on. I had went to a Captain Con about 5 years ago, right before COVID had hit, and there was not nearly this amount of board games there. So I was really pleased to see how much there was going on, everything you could find. There was some people doing shows. There were some LARP people from King Richard's Fair, apparently, or I shouldn't say.
Yeah,
LARP. There were some actors from King Richard's Fair that were there doing different, comedy, and there was a karaoke night that we at first were going to go to, but I was getting a wicked headache. So I kind of was like, nah, it was in a small room and I was not feeling being in a tiny room with a lot of people with a headache.
Yeah, I'd say that's the only thing that I would suggest they change is find a bigger room for the karaoke, because a lot of people were interested in it.
Yeah.
And we actually sat outside of the room that was there and did some of the play to win games so we could still sort of hear what was going on, but we weren't crammed into that room. But again, a lot of their bigger rooms were for miniatures, because I know that's a big part of what Captain Con always was. And again, we didn't do any miniatures, but I mean, I was looking at some of the matches and stuff like that. Really interesting. Just again, that whole patience thing of like moving people, and they had their tape measure out, and they had like this weird little tool that I guess was like line of sight tool, so you could see if you could attack something or not. So it was a lot of interesting things, and tons of dice being rolled because they roll a bunch of D6s. There was a vendor there that actually had all these cool dice. Baron of Dice, I think, was their name. They had a bunch of cool looking dice, and I was like, if I played that, I would definitely be buying these. And I'm glad I'm not, because there was actually a miniature that was like, I don't know, 3 feet tall. And the guy's like, oh yeah, this is a famous miniature that apparently went to Germany and won this Warhammer 40K tournament. And there was literally people at the convention that was telling him about, oh, I remember back in 2004 when this beat this. And he's like, so apparently it's famous. He's like, I didn't know, some guy gave it to me. I was like, oh, that's cool. It's a cool hobby and everything. I just could not get into it. It would just take up way too much time. But they had a ton of tables for that too. They had tournaments for Warhammer 40K. There was other tournaments too for other miniature games. Again, I don't know all the names, but
War Machines and Hordes, likely. My friend Peter plays a bunch of those. We actually were there as well.
Yeah, nice. We didn't get to play an RPG. That was the one thing that because we wound up canceling, because I think we did the Doom Links tournament, which was fun, but we both did not do well. And
we did not.
Of course, someone who never played the game completely destroyed us like every game too, and there's just nothing you can do. That is a random type of game. Same thing with like Munchkin, where
there's a lot of luck involved in those. Strategy can help and can carry you, but there is just sometimes it's the heart of the cards wasn't there, and it just doesn't work out.
Absolutely. But yeah, we wound up playing that instead of the RPG we were planning on doing. There's actually an RPG, Enclave, that I wanted to try, because it was like a tableless RPG, so you didn't roll die, you didn't have to do all the things. It was mostly more storytelling than anything, and you would just sort of, when things popped up, you could do that. I do want to try them out because they have like a Discord, and I feel like it's that gateway to RPG. Like, you don't have to roll the dice, you don't have to do all those things. Big thing is, though, then you lose the fun of rolling the dice, so it's thing you want to try out. But yeah, it's called Enclave. I talked with the guy who created it. It seemed really interesting, and we were planning on doing a quick demo of it, because he's like, you can literally do a demo in like 30 minutes of an RPG, which usually doesn't happen. He's like, let's do it. And then Sunday morning, I was planning on us doing that, and he already packed up. So we'll touch base with him at some point, because I do want to try that out. And he's like, yeah, you can hit me up on Discord and we can do something there. So that was a plan for RPG. I don't want to lie to our fan. I said we were going to do an RPG and didn't, but we'll have other opportunities as well. Yeah, honestly, it was just such a fun thing. It was cool to see like the early design of games and see the early prototypes and have people talk to us about it, how they started from, hey, I started with this concept and it changed so much into this. Again, there's interviews and stuff like that. It was great vendors too. There's another interview that is up or going to be up on YouTube, where the vendor did mostly Ren fairs, and they had a lot of really old school board games that they used to play like back in 1800s and everything
They
else.
were historically accurate games researched, because a lot of places you can only sell period appropriate things, so you
Yep.
can't sell Monopoly. Even if it's on leatherwork, you have to sell the Royal Game of Ur, games that would have been around in the time.
Yeah, so it was cool, and they had it on like the leather thing. You could roll it up and everything. They had a little satchel with all the little pieces in it and everything too. So did an interview with her. So I thought that was really cool. The OG Gateway games, like this is the first thing where someone's like, "Hey, what if we draw a grid and move these things around, and that's how we play this game." So I thought that was cool. That'll be up there. Yeah, I mean, there was just so many things there than what I was expecting. I did not expect that, and I was pleasantly surprised by everything that's going on.
We should mention as well that the folks at Captain Con were nice enough to give us media badges as well. So
Yeah,
we're there to cover the con, talk to people, and I had a great time. I definitely want to go back again next year. Looking forward to it again, and I'll definitely take the time off. And I say we should get a hotel for both nights rather than coming back and forth, just because it gives us the ability to do more. There was so much that we still, like you said, you wanted to do the RPG, wanted to do a lot of things that we weren't able to.
Yeah, I mean, we can see about getting a room in that hotel, because that was the other thing too. The cool thing was when we were taking play to win games, the guy's like, "Yeah, just bring it back before 7 a.m." And I was like, "Oh yeah, because people are literally going to be in here playing games nonstop," because it was cool. It was literally just like you pass through this little hallway, and that would be the convention, and then you pass through it back, and that would be the hotel. So they divided it really, really well. There was yoga classes there too. I was actually gonna check that out because I've been doing that, and I'm getting old, so I'm trying to make sure that my back doesn't go out. So it was even cool that they had stuff like that out there as well, because you're sitting for maybe 12 hours straight in a day playing games or whatever.
I wanted to mention for the board game library, they had a list up there of games that were appropriate and more family friendly, so you wouldn't have to just sit there and be like, "Oh, if you brought your children one day or somebody." There was a list. I thought that was a nice touch for being like, "Hey, you can play any of these games," versus like trying to figure it out yourself or getting a game that was too inappropriate or too difficult for families.
That's cool. The other thing I noticed, I can't remember the name of the game. There was a couple of them actually that I saw on their game library that were rare out of print games. I thought that was cool that they offered games like that otherwise you'd never be able to play it. So I thought that was cool. Honestly, we probably talk over and over again. I know I mentioned probably, are we going to make this a two-parter because there's so much to talk about? But I hope, we obviously help them out by talking about it. They posted a bunch of stuff on our Instagram and Facebook page, sort of saying what they had. But I was actually generally excited about it. I was like, I think this is going to be, better than what we were expecting. And it was. I was giving myself high expectations, and I know you were like, no, don't get them too high. It's not going to be like PAX. But there was things that like just a little smoother with PAX because it wasn't so big. I mean, I'm sure they want to get to that PAX level anyways, but I'm sure they'd love to get that many people and generate that much money. But it was nice to have that smaller feel.
Yeah, no, it was great overall. The right size, enough going on. And it was never a time they were like, "Oh, I don't know what to do." There was always something. You said it was 24 hours pretty much. It started at midnight and ended at midnight on Saturday, and it started again at midnight on Sunday.
Yeah.
It gave them a lot of credit. I could see there was probably a lot of people that didn't really sleep much that whole weekend.
Definitely not. Why would you if you could do that? But I know I was tired because I didn't sleep so much on Friday because of driving back and forth. And again, the tournament they were running ran till midnight itself, not including, do you want to just pick a game out of the play to win or pick a game out of the board game library? And there was people that were like, "Hey, we want to meet up with you and play." And I was like, "Oh, we're doing painting. Oh, we're doing Doomlings tournament." So it didn't always work for our schedule as well to meet up with everyone. But I think having a room in that hotel next time definitely would help. Definitely doing it next year. I think that'll be something that we can do every year as well, because why not? It's right in our backyard or side yard, I guess, for Rhode Island. But is there anything else that I forgot?
I'm sure that we forgot something, and I apologize if we got names wrong or the games, but in general, I actually had a suggestion from one of our listeners and one of our friends that we didn't really implement so much, and I apologize. I got to make sure we try it more often. Is saying the game name multiple times throughout the description, whereas we're really good. Like we say the name of the game and then we just talk about it. And sometimes if you're listening and you miss the name at the beginning, they have to rewind back to it. So I was like, that's actually a good suggestion. But I'm sorry that I only mentioned it now.
No. So just quickly, we'll go over the games so that way, in case we didn't mention at least the ones that aren't available or coming out or that we aren't going to do a review of, I should say. So Atoma Garden had Starline Hill. That was that making constellation game we talked about. Then there's also Broken Pass, which has that interview that's by Over the Tabletop. That actually we will be doing a review, but that's a game as well. We also have the SRG universe had Scallywag. That was that Liar's Dice game we talked about. Then they have Super Show, which is the wrestling game, which we will be doing a review of as well. Then Tabletop Shelf Games had Magician's Challenge. That's a game that we will be doing a review of as well. And then Mill Rat Studios had the Mill Rat Pack, which is a 5-in-1 game where we played the two games, which I can't remember the names of now, of course, but it was the picture on your phone game and then the little raccoons trying to get across the path game.
Scrapbook.
Handbasket Games, Fake Experiment, which we will be doing a review of as well. I think that's everything.
I like how at the beginning we're like, this isn't just going to be a review podcast. We're just going to talk about games. And now we're like, turns out we actually like talking about the games and reviewing them. So.
Yeah, well, I think that's something that, again, when I listen to podcasts too, that you want to hear about a game and get excited. And I think there's so many games coming out. And it's so ridiculous. Like, again, we found these very small independent builders of games and designers that are just like, I put
Gina's gone into my closet and I hear a noise that she
It looks like you literally went into your robot. Like that's your Iron Man suit because you just walked and sort of like disappeared as the suit. You come back in a robot suit, I'll be.
I didn't have one. I didn't have anything either. But I was like, as you were saying that, I'm like, that'd have been funny. I even just had a helmet or something, but didn't have one near me.
Well, I think like we were talking about like with reviews. The reason we started doing it is because I feel like we ran into a lot of games that we wasted time on and we were like, this sucks. Or we'd play it with only two people and we're like, this isn't a 2-player game. Like there was what was it, the Juicy Fruits game that we wound up playing at Captain Con and I posted it on Instagram. And there was a point where it was a 2-player game. If I wound up getting a certain tile and it just shut down the game. Gary did not have a chance, could probably get all the other tiles that were left in the game and still not have a engine that could catch up to that one tile I got, which I was like, well, that's sort of stupid. So I'm sure playing it with more players, it makes more sense. But again, hey, we can save someone maybe 30 or 40 minutes of playing a game and realizing, oh, this probably isn't the best at 2 players. Same thing with like the time, like you were mentioning too, where it's like, oh, it's only a 40-minute game. And I forgot what game we were reviewing recently. And you're like, Skull King, where you're like per player, because again, depending on how long that person chooses to play a card, it could slow down the game a lot. So you never know how accurate those times are. I know they do a ton of play testing and everything else, but like this has to be realistic. Same thing with like Munchkin. I don't know what the time for Munchkin is, but in that tournament, we had to literally play one game that was an actual game that had an end. And then he's like, oh, yeah, you have 30 minutes to see who can get to the highest level because we were trying to play rounds. And he's like, otherwise, we're going to be here till 3 a.m. And we're like, we're not doing it. So, yeah. But yeah, we'll have more reviews, obviously, coming up with stuff from Captain Con. We still have 2 left over from PAX Unplugged, which I was happy to hear from other podcasts that they still haven't done all their PAX Unplugged reviews. So we are not running far behind compared to other podcasts. So I'm happy with that. And then we will be getting more review copies actually sent to us as well. So we have a couple of publishers that are so kind to still work with us. So I guess we're doing something right. And we'll be getting more games by them and talking to you about that and more conventions that we're doing and Gary's travels. And unfortunately, Gary's not wearing a stupid shirt. I mean, it could be stupid, but it's a union, and I guess I'll be nice about his union.
I mean, it's the reason that I get all this time off and I get paid enough money to do these things. So, but I won't get too political.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm working for a retail company that obviously doesn't want to use. We'll have arguments there, anyways. So I mean, honestly, you'll hear more from us. I think we covered everything in Captain Con. If we didn't, you'll obviously follow our Instagram, follow our Facebook, follow our YouTube channel now that we have. There'll be more postings on there in case I forgot anything for Captain Con. We'll obviously be talking about what's coming up next year because, like I said, unless something else comes up, we will be going to that pretty much every year because a little bit over an hour for us, and it's something that we really enjoyed. Yeah, and then hopefully we'll find other conventions. That's our plan, to scour the world for conventions. That's why Gary's going to Japan. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm sure there's some great board game conventions there, and if you have other
Germany
suggestions, or Essen Spiel, we got to get to Essen Spiel, but we need to go to Origins or Gen Con before we go to Essen Spiel.
Well, we got to win one of those tournaments. Yeah,
we also need to get a pass. That's a different story.
We tried. I mean, I thought that was cool too, that Captain Con had tournaments that you could win. Gen Con.
It wasn't just like one; it was like 3 or 4 of them at least had it. But
yeah.
And if you have suggestions on things that we can do in the show, you want to see us do more of, less of, feel free to reach out and let us know, because we're doing this for ourselves. We're also doing it for the people that listen.
Yeah. We enjoy this, obviously, but we want people to enjoy listening to us. And, hopefully you guys have suggestions which are good. Like, for instance, mentioning the name of the game several times, because that probably helps. If we're talking about a game we like and someone's like, wait, what was that game that you like so much? Crap, what was it? Let me go back and see. That sort of screws it up. And I listen to podcasts driving, and I know if I have to record something or rewind something, I'm like trying to drive and touch my phone, and that's sort of illegal. So I don't want.
You would definitely never do anything illegal.
No, especially not while driving. So, anyways, now that I've incriminated myself, Gary, I guess we're at the point where, what's your sign-off phase? Sign-off phrase. I did tell you you had to think of a Captain Pirate oriented one. So did you think of one?
Are you ready for it?
That better not be it, because it's not.
Well, no, but I'm glad it was all hands on deck at Captain Con. It was a great time, and next year we'll be sure to plunder the depths for even more fun.
That was terrible. But anyways, yeah, listen.
Tune in next time for more board games and banter.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. Hopefully you guys enjoy this. And again, we'll obviously be talking about games in the future and more conventions that we go to. And we'll have a ton of stuff to talk about with, obviously, PPCon. PPCon, I don't know. Anyways, and
M2P2.
Gary, huh?
M2P2.
M2P2, that might work too.
Kind of sounds like a Star Wars robot.
I was about to say, it sounds like we're ripping off Star Wars. Anyways, listen, subscribe, hit that. Oh, I can say smash that like button now that we're on YouTube, right? Isn't that a thing?
Yeah,
Is that a thing?
So.
I don't know if that's a thing anymore.
No, we're old.
Anyways, thanks for listening, everyone. We will be back soon. Bye.